If you spent any amount of time engaging with the arts, music, movies, theater, dance, painting, whatever it may be, if you spent any time at all engaging with the arts, you've probably noticed that mediocrity tends to rise to the top. Pretty regularly, actually, at least in the moment. But does it stay there, or does excellence finally win out? I don't know, but I got some ideas. With all the controversy going around right now about the Mr. Beast channel here on YouTube, I couldn't help but have my own thoughts on it that had nothing whatsoever to do with the controversy. Because if you've watched any of my videos, you know that, essentially I just complain. And when I saw that this was happening, my first thoughts were, unlike everybody else's apparently, who are focused on the controversy, is how did someone so mediocre ever rise to the top? I mean, have you watched any Mr. Beast? Because clearly, billions have. Have you watched any? Be careful, because your brain will fall out of your head while you're doing so. When you read about this guy, this Jimmy Donaldson, I can't even imagine to be trapped in the corner at a party with him or something. That's like a waking nightmare. I mean, you're dealing with someone from what I've seen and what I've heard in interviews with him. You're dealing with someone, just mired down in this torpid swamp of nescience and incomprehension, languishing in this hollow sinkhole of an intellectual vacancy. In that kind of situation, good luck propelling past the intellectual bar of favorite flavors of bubblegum. And yet, number one channel. Why? I would say because of the mediocrity. I mean, averages are average. There's a reason why the average person is average, because they're the average person. See, most people, most works, most art, most everything falls within the average. It kind of mathematically has to. But does it stay that way? If I had to make a guess as to why mediocrity so often rises to the top, I would guess that young people have got a lot to do with it. If we go back to Mr. Beast, his channel is viewed practically exclusively by young people. That's who watches his channel. And young people are inexperienced. I mean, that's a part of being young. You don't have the experience or the wisdom of being older. Wisdom's not a sign of intelligence, it's a sign of you've lived through things and you've become wise to how things work because of your experience. Young people don't have that, so they can watch a Mr. Beast and think, oh my God, this is really good. And other people are like, you okay? And so young people drive a lot of success, especially in the arts. What happens, though, over time is the mediocrity that rose to the top briefly doesn't always stay there. If you go back to, say, the mid-60s, early to mid-60s, with the British invasion, and you've got a term coined specifically for the Beatles because of their popularity, Beatlemania, or because they were insanely popular with young women especially. But you'll also find there were plenty of other British bands coming in that were also extremely popular. And not just the Rolling Stones. In 1965, Herman's Hermits had songs in the top 10 for 24 consecutive weeks, which was a record at the time. Herman's Hermits. Now, by 1968-69, it was pretty clear that the Rolling Stones and the Beatles were the real thing. And over time, their reputations only grew. While Herman's Hermits, while being very popular when they first started out, obviously didn't have the kind of staying power you need to build the kind of legendary reputations of the Beatles or the Stones. So the mediocrity did rise to the top, but Good stuff rises too. It's all really just a crapshoot. Whatever young people like rises to the top. What sticks around is usually the good stuff. Not entirely, but usually. Popularity endures for those that have something more than just an appeal to the very young. For instance, sticking with music on this one, if you look at the most popular musicians in the world today, and I use that term very loosely, musical acts, not musicians. If you look at musical acts around the world right now, and you were asked, what do you think is the most popular one out there? And I think a lot of people would probably say Taylor Swift or Beyonce, but they'd both be wrong, because it's BTS, that South Korean boy band. They're huge, and their appeal is almost entirely, if not entirely, young people. Whereas Taylor Swift and Beyonce have gone beyond their initial appeal to young people, and like the Beatles and the Stones by the late 60s, they're now understood to be the real deal. Whereas, if you have ever listened to any music in your life, if you have any experience at all of hearing music, and then you listen to BTS, you're going to be like, this is crap. This is pure crap. Why is this popular? Will it remain so? I doubt it. I seriously doubt it. I can imagine a day, decades and decades from now, when people will still be listening to, discussing, and understanding Taylor Swift and Beyonce. I cannot imagine that being the same for BTS. The stuff that gets remembered has something that the other stuff does not. How's that for being super specific? Some stuff is better than other stuff. Overall, very nebulously speaking, I would say that mediocrity is pretty much the result of youth driving the culture, and that's why it rises to the top. And what becomes recognized as great and legendary and iconic later is a result of excellence, of outlasting that initial being lumped in with everything mediocre because it's just what young people like, and becoming something that everybody likes. If you become the first person in the world to live to be 300, I'm betting you'll still be talking about the great acts that we all know, and the great movies we all know, and the great actors we all know. You ain't going to be talking about the ones that are necessarily the most popular right now. Because just because they're popular right now doesn't really mean anything for staying power. And also, the history of it really is kind of encouraging, because it tells us that, don't worry, just because this crappy thing is number one now, that doesn't mean that culture is sliding. Because at every single step in world cultural history, there have been things that were incredibly popular in their time that just completely disappear over time. Drive safely.